one thing that I've learned, Oliver, is that number one, the military, or I should say the VA, does
Right.
not advertise the VA home loan benefit. They don't advertise it. It's like you can't go and see a commercial for it, or you can't go on YouTube and see a commercial for a VA. That's just not how it works.
Record button, and we're going to do this. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I've got a great guest today. This man is a mortgage originator. He is a former Marine. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Once a Marine, always a Marine. So he's still a Marine, technically.
Well, let me jump in for a second really
go
quick
ahead.
here, Oliver.
Go ahead.
We
I'm
say
in
once
trouble.
a Marine, no, you're good, man. So us Marines that we think we outsmarted the system, we say once a Marine, always a Marine. So why re-enlist?
There you
You
go.
with me on that? You check it?
I love it. I love it. He is a
All
VA
right, man,
loan
go ahead.
specialist. This is, ladies and gentlemen, a guy I'm a huge fan of. I'm excited to have him on here. His name is Mr. Jimmy Versalino. Jimmy, how you doing, man?
Better than I deserve, my man. And really quick, I want to say something. There was a gentleman that I've listened to for many years. His name is Jim Rohn. He's a business philosopher. You may have heard of him before, but he told me a story once, and he said, "The man says, I want to be a great leader." Wonderful, he says. The first thing that we do is we go into his house and we ask him to see his library, because what a man reads pours an infinite amount into his mental factory.
Wow.
And the fabric of his life is built off of that library or mental factory. So, dude, you got a great I share all of that to say you've got a great library behind you there. And
Thanks, man.
I'm somewhat envious of what you've got going on, and I can tell that you are a student. You're a student of life. So thank you for having me. I appreciate y'all.
Hey, man, I'm absolutely honored. That's flattery at its best. I did not pay him yet. Don't worry. I need that Venmo after this. Jimmy, we can get that done.
Perfect.
No, but again, man, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Having you on is an absolute pleasure. And you talk a lot about the VA loan stuff. And you and I had this, you actually mentioned this right before we hit the record button, but we don't have enough education when it comes to military on the tools that we actually have while in and even after we get out. And you and what you do on your channel is huge because you teach people about the VA loan. And there's so many things happening with VA loan that people don't understand or realize. And I wanted to bring you on knowing it's PCS season coming up. The summer PCS season about to arrive. So it's key. Absolutely. It's key for people to understand how to use their VA loan. So what I like to do is I want to go just as deep as we can in the VA loan with the time that we have allotted. So I don't waste your time, and our listeners and our viewers can really get into it and know, okay, this is what I need to do with the VA loan. So let's start with, let's say you're moving, right? PCSing. We're going to PCS to, let's go Kaneohe, Hawaii. I'm sure you're familiar with this particular location. We're going to PCS Kaneohe, Hawaii. Now,
spent some time there. Yep.
Yeah, we're gonna PCS. Now, I found a place. What's the first step when going to get that VA loan? What's the first thing I need to do?
Yeah, man. So these are really good questions. And, to the conversation that we were having just a moment ago, it's like one thing that I've learned, Oliver, is that number one, the military, or I should say the VA, does not advertise the VA home loan benefit. They don't advertise it. It's like you can't go and see a commercial for it, or you can't go on YouTube and see a commercial for a VA. That's just not how it works. The way it works is that the VA guarantees loans. So that's the first thing that I would say. It's kind of contrary to popular belief. We think as veterans and active duty service members that we're just getting a VA loan. The VA is handing us the money for the loan, and that we ultimately end up using those funds to go out and purchase a house. So I would start with telling veterans and active duty service members the following. The VA loan is simply a VA or government-backed loan. So let's say, for example, that I'm giving you $1,000, okay? Or I'm lending you $1,000, Oliver, okay? Now, let's say that I've got somebody over here to my left and they say, "Hey, Jimmy." I say, "Yes." And they say, "You know that loan that you just made, Oliver?" I say, "Yes." They say, "In the event that he were to default on this loan," now I know that this isn't going to happen to you because you, again, are a financial student. You're taking care of business. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that in the event that the veteran were to default, this investor over here says, "Hey, Jimmy, that loan that you just made to Oliver, I'll guarantee it by 25%. I say, All right, sounds pretty good. Basically, Oliver just gave me a down payment on a loan of 25%. I know that I'll be able to recoup some of my loss.
Right.
And that's all the VA does, Oliver. They just guarantee the loan in the event of default. So the mortgage lender, Jimmy Versalino, right, where I partner with First Western Trust Bank, we're licensed to lend in all 50 states. We are lending out the money on the loan. The VA is just guaranteeing the loan, saying, hey, Jimmy, in the event that the veteran were to default, we'll cut a check for 25% of that loan balance. So that's where I want to start with the VA loan, is have an active duty service member understand how that works and kind of what takes place. So in order for an active duty service member, as you mentioned, that's PCSing from be it Maryland to Kaneohe Bay, Hawaii, or really anywhere across the nation, and you're absolutely right, now is peak PCS season, so families can get settled in before the start of the school year. But the first step that they have to take is to talk to a mortgage loan originator, preferably a mortgage loan originator who specializes in VA loans. And the reason why I say this is because it's kind of like in the Marine Corps. I'll give you an example. We're all known as basic riflemen. Every Marine is a basic rifleman, regardless of MOS, right?
Right.
Every branch of service, we have different MOSs. Now, here's the thing, Oliver. If Jimmy V, who is an 0311 infantryman, okay, a grunt, was working on electrical equipment on that aircraft, would you want to get on that aircraft?
Absolutely not. Not happening.
Okay, thank you. I didn't think you'd say yes, right? But the reason why is because Jimmy V hasn't been properly trained on that electrical equipment on aircraft, right?
Exactly.
And you may not ever get to your destination, right, if you jump on that bird, right? Because I may have touched some things or did some things that I shouldn't have done, right?
Right. Yep.
And in the same breath, the avionics Marine maybe isn't proficient or efficient with shooting a Mark 19 or a 240 Golf or a 50 cal, these types of serious weaponry, right? So a active duty service member or veteran needs to connect with a mortgage loan originator who specializes in VA loans, because there's a lot of subtle nuances that exist in the VA home loan process that somebody who dabbles in mortgage loans or maybe originates one a year or two a year doesn't have enough looks and opportunities to become proficient in. Right. So, for example, when somebody's PCSing, you're going to hand me an LES report, leave an earnings statement, and I'm going to see that you've got BAH in a different location. And if I don't know what I'm doing, I'm thinking, okay, well, I should use this. Maybe this person receives $3,500 a month, and I'm going, man, they must be some kind of a 4-star general or something like that because they make so much money in BAH. Well, what I have to know and what I have to understand is that no, we have to use the BAH for the new location to qualify them for, not from the departing one that they just gave me the LES report for. So I'm trying to kind of paint a picture here as to why it's important for somebody to work with a mortgage loan originator who specializes in VA loans. And that's really the first step, to your point, connecting with somebody who does just that. So once they have a mortgage loan originator that they're comfortable working with, they'll have a preliminary mortgage consult, really designed to learn.
Jimmy, before you go further through, let's back up a single step. You said to find the right loan originator. I want to know, how do they find the right how do they find the right
I'm with you.
loan originator? Because that's a you and I know, it's a lot of research and looking into it. But for those who don't know, and this is their first time, Joe Snuffy or Jody, who everybody's got their own weirdo who's in the military in their own branch. But Joe Snuffy or Jody's looking right now, trying to figure out how to find them, and this is their first time doing it. How do they find the right loan? What are they looking for on those websites? What are they looking to find?
Yeah, good question. So there's a couple of different ways that one can be referred to a mortgage loan originator. The first and some of the most common ways that we're finding these things is that the real estate professional that they're working with will say, hey, I've got, Jody or, Joe Schmuckatelli, as we would say in the Marine Corps, right? I want to connect you with this particular mortgage loan originator who they've built a relationship with. So a referral from their real estate advisor could be one source.
Okay.
In this new environment that we're in today, a majority of our clients and families, veteran active duty service members and families, are finding me on YouTube. And the reason why I'm seeing so much more of this is because I think that there is a huge thirst and desire for knowledge when it comes to VA home loan benefits. That
Absolutely.
somebody who speaks their language, right, has served in the military, understands this stuff, can can how would I say educate them on this process and how it works, and somebody that has a detailed understanding of the loan process. So they can
Right.
go to the internet, they can type in VA home loan specialist, they can look for lenders who specialize in VA loans. There's a few of them out there. Or they can go to YouTube. And at the same time, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't say, hey, I can be a resource for these families and veterans and active duty service members as well. And
Right.
I'm on YouTube. They can find me at VAloans4vets.com. So again, just making sure that they really have somebody who understands the VA home loan process, in my opinion, is going to be critical to mission success. So
Absolutely.
once they have that preliminary mortgage consultation with them, Oliver, what will happen is we'll learn a little bit more about what it is that they're looking to accomplish, and then they're going to submit a loan application. Generally speaking, done online or can be done over the phone depending upon the family's needs. So once they've submitted that loan application, that is kind of like what I refer to as the X-rays. Now,
Okay.
one of the common misconceptions of a VA loan is that it's automatic approval, right? That we're automatically approved for our VA loan. Not the case. Okay, we still have to qualify. And that's one of the things that I really preach to my veteran listenership and audiences is that you can be eligible for a VA loan, but not be pre-qualified. And you
Got
can
it.
be pre-qualified for a VA loan and not be eligible. So determining eligibility up front and in advance is something that's critical to the success of the transaction for the veteran or active duty service member. The way we do that is once the veteran has submitted an application, we request something called a certificate of eligibility.
Okay.
This certificate of eligibility is basically a document that we get from the VA that says, hey, congratulations, you've served your country honorably, or you're an active duty service member, you've done more than 90 days of
Right.
active service. You, my friend, are eligible for a VA loan. Remembering that you still have to get pre-qualified for the VA loan. And generally speaking, Oliver, veterans have to have a minimum credit score of 620 in order to qualify. So remember, I'm the lender lending out the money, so we get to put the terms on the loan. Hey,
Right.
Mr. Veteran, you've got to have a 620, or some lenders might require 620. In fact, Oliver, there's even lenders that will go below 620.
Wow.
And so, generally I've never seen anything lower than 580, but I always tell my veterans, look, you want to have the most optimized credit score as possible when you're buying a house. Why? Because number one, it's going to save you money in the form of monthly payment. And number two, the amount of interest that you're paying to the lender. And number three, it's going to increase the likelihood that you're going to be approved for the mortgage loan. So why not have the best credit score possible, right?
Okay.
So once we've downloaded the application, that's kind of what I refer to as the X-rays. It kind of allows us to see the full profile of the veteran or active duty service member. At that time, kind of referring to your PCS family that's relocating from the East Coast to Kaneohe Bay, what will happen is we'll collect all of that documentation, W-2s, bank statements, LES reports, PCS orders, right, to show that you're moving duty stations. We'll
Absolutely.
gather all of that back, and then we will then pre-qualify the active duty service member for a specific amount. And I know that your audience is big on financial literacy, and I want to kind of speak to this for just a moment. Just because a mortgage lender pre-qualifies you for X doesn't mean that you have to spend X, or doesn't mean that you should be spending X, right?
Ooh.
You,
Right.
as the veteran, have to determine what your budget is up front and kind of, as I tell my families and clients, reverse engineer a mortgage payment to the borrower's individual needs. So if you told
Right.
me, Jimmy, I want to be at $2,000 a month, I'd say, Roger that, Oliver. We should be looking at homes in the $375,000 price point.
Right. Right.
Okay.
Right.
So once we've done all of this with the family up front, we've pre-qualified them for their VA loan, we've determined their eligibility. Now they're cleared hot, ready to go out and put some rounds down range,
I
as we
love
would
it.
say in the
I
Corps.
love it. I love it.
Right?
Right.
And so that's where they go out and they start shopping with their real estate professional, right? 30, 45 days later, once they get under contract, on a property, they will close on the house and they will begin to, as I say on my channel, start to build and create wealth through the acquisition of real estate utilizing your VA home loan benefit.
Right. Right. Now here's a question for you, Jimmy, too. With what you've just said, for those who don't know, the military community has a very good chance of doing what we call a burst strategy. Buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. The burst strategy. Buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. We have a very good opportunity to do that with this VA loan. Is the process for someone who plans on doing a BRRRR or investing with that VA loan and living in that property different than the process for someone who's moving in with their 2 or 3 kids?
That's an interesting question. I guess it just depends on each individual's family needs and what it is overall that they're looking to accomplish. But this kind of brings into question one of the most, or probably the single greatest aha that veterans and active duty service members get from my channel, and that is something called second tier entitlement. And basically what you're referring to when you talk about this BRRRR strategy, buy, reinvest, refinance, rent, so on, is when I say build and create wealth through the acquisition of real estate, a lot of mortgage lenders, a lot of real estate agents, and most importantly, our veterans don't understand how this works. And here's the reality of the situation. I'm just going to give a brief breakdown of the VA loan, Oliver, for your audience, so that way they can kind of understand this stuff and how it works. Our VA home loan is the only, did I say only?
That's only.
Right? Only 100%, only 100% financing loan that's available on the marketplace today that a veteran or active duty service member can purchase a home up to any purchase price they'd like. So there are no caps on the VA home loan benefit, right? You could buy a $3 million home with no money down on a VA loan. So in 2020, the Trump administration signed into law something called the Vietnam Veteran Blue Water Initiative Act. And inside of this legislation, they lifted the cap on VA loans. So there is no longer a cap on VA loans, right? So no money down, no private mortgage insurance, and typically with interest rates that are anywhere from 1/4 to 3/8 of a percentage point lower than their conventional counterparts, and certainly cheaper than an FHA loan as well. So that's just kind of a general overview of the VA loan. Now, where I think veterans and active duty service members miss opportunity that once again will allow them to build and create wealth is by utilizing this strategy that you just referred to in the BRRRR. So let's say that a veteran buys a home in 2018, and for the sake of this conversation moving forward, can I say veteran and it be synonymous with active duty as well? So that way I don't have to say both.
Absolutely.
You good with that? Okay.
Yeah, of course.
So let's just assume that a veteran purchases a home while on active duty for $300,000.
Okay.
Right? They live in that home, and then 2 years later, because just like death and taxes, in the military, one thing that is imminent is PCS orders. We know that, right? So let's say that exactly. Every 2 to 3 years, generally speaking. So let's say now that I've lived in this home for 2 to 3 years, but I'm like, gosh, I kind of don't want to sell it. I've done well. Could I use another VA home loan? And the answer is absolutely yes, you can. So you can put a renter in home A, Oliver, and stop me if you already know this, sir, but put a renter in home A, offset that mortgage with 75% of the gross rental income, and then go out and deploy the remaining $426,200 that you have left over on a new home. So now, my friend, you have 2 VA loans at the same time, right? And this is not just for active duty service members. This is for a veteran that maybe bought a home in 2012 that has now since leveled up in life and business, has a family, children, etc., that wants to buy a new home, more desirable location, bigger square footage, house with a pool, and they're like, man, I don't know if I could qualify with 2 mortgage payments, and I'd really like to kind of keep this home for my retirement. Well, now you can buy, in that scenario that I just gave you, $200,000 on your first, $526,200 on the next home, no money down. And that's how we can really start to build and create wealth through the acquisition of real estate utilizing our VA home loan benefit. And in addition to that, you think about it, well, Jimmy, how many can or how many VA loans can a veteran have at the same time?
It's a good question.
Generally speaking, as long as the loan amount is greater than $144,000,
Mm-hmm.
okay, you can have essentially unlimited up to $726,200. So let's say, for example, you use 200 on your first, 200 on your second, you would
Mm-hmm.
have 326,200 left over to use on the third VA home loan. Now, it might be challenging to find a $200,000 home in the nation, but it can be done depending upon where you're looking, number one. And number two, and I should preface it by saying this, you have to live in the home as your primary residence. So as long as you live in that home, Oliver, for 1 year, you can then put a renter in it and go buy that new home, more desirable location, better school district,
Right.
etc.
Right. Now you could definitely find a 200K home. It's going to be a little sketchy when you wake up in the morning and go to sleep at night, but you can definitely find one right now. What's interesting though, and this is the part where I think people get confused, and please help me if you could, Jimmy, to clarify, because it's very difficult for me to describe this. But like earlier when you said, hey, there's no cap, but at the same time,
Right.
you also said, hey, you've got that 720K number that you can't really go past with more than one loan. How is that? Why is that a thing? And how does that work? Because that sometimes can be really confusing.
Yeah, it is confusing. You're absolutely right. And I've been trying to think of ways to describe it lately.
Right.
And so the best way that I can describe this is my kids. I have a 12-year-old and a 13-year-old, Oliver. Okay.
Okay.
They're great kids, but they're also rascals. Okay.
Of course.
They love to go to the mall. All right.
Okay.
And so every once in a while, they'll go to the mall, right? And they'll ask mom and dad for money, right? And
Right.
so let's just assume that, my son's been a good boy. He's worked hard for the month. And let's say that I gave him $100 to spend.
Right.
Right. And so my son likes sneakers, so he's not going to get very far with $100 in sneakers. But my point being is he could use that $100 at any store within the mall that he wants. He can use 25 on, at Lids. He could use 25 at the sneaker store. He could use 25 somewhere else. He can kind of disperse that $100 however he'd like.
Right.
But let's just assume that he goes into a store where he finds something that he wants to buy. It's one item for $125.
Okay.
And he calls mom and dad. And he says, Mom and Dad, I found something that I really want to buy. Can you give me a one-time exception above that $100? And can I go up to $125?
Right.
And I say, you know what, you little rascal? Yeah, this one time and this time only, I'm going to do that. Well, that's kind of like the VA loan, right? If a veteran uses anything greater than the conforming loan limit, the VA will allow us to go above that amount on a one-time exception with no money down.
Okay.
Tracking with me on that?
Got it.
So if I don't use my $100 or the 726,200, when I go back to my son at the mall, he can use 25 here, 25 there, 25 there, until he gets to his $100. So every veteran is given $726,200 worth of a VA loan to use. They can go above that amount one time if they find a home that kind of suits their needs and it's considered a VA high balance or jumbo loan.
Okay, got it. That makes perfect sense. Now that kind of clarifies the confusion with that, because you'll hear that constantly. Hey, you can it's capless, but there is this, like you said, it's not a cap. It's just a way to mitigate. It's a check to the balance is the best way to describe it, right? It's from keeping people from going crazy, and we have another 2008 situation. So that makes perfect sense. All right, Jimmy.
Yeah, the VA does not. It's not unlimited funds, right?
Right. Absolutely. Okay, so we've gone through the process of finding a nice house. We've got the VA done. We're moving in. A year later, what does it look like for a veteran to refinance out or to do? Oh, matter of fact, let's scratch that. Let's say, are you aware? You're tracking the VA loan, construction loan, right? Mm-hmm. So the construction loan, What's the difference in the process with a construction loan versus the one with the VA loan? Because from what I understand, if you have a VA loan, you're putting in for it. Person that will come in, and everything's blessed off. Okay, cool. It's a brand new build, no big deal. But if you're going into a house that has to be fixed up, and you got to do work to it, there's a process that goes with that. Am I correct?
You're absolutely correct. And that process, from the standpoint of actually getting a VA loan, it's
Right.
no different. However,
Mm-hmm.
the difference lies in the additional documentation that's needed for the loan from the standpoint of the builder's bid,
Got
number
it.
one, and number two, the structural engineer, and number three, the architect, right? And so what happens with a VA construction to perm loan, Oliver, it's significantly different from the standpoint of this. We as veterans cannot pay interest during the build. I know that sounds crazy, but it's true. We can't pay interest. So what has to happen is the builder says, all right, I'm going to have to build in the interest into my overall bid. And then every month when your payments are due, I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
send a check to the lender for the interest carry. So that becomes problematic because you have to now build in the cost of construction, or I should say the cost of the interest into the
Right.
construction, and you
Right.
could potentially run into appraisal issues. So I feel like the
Mm.
VA's construction to perm process, in my opinion, is antiquated. It's not very, from what I see, realistic
Right.
when it comes to the overall actuality and likelihood that a builder would be willing to do this on behalf of a veteran. So that's my concern about construction to perm lending on VA loans. It is a product that can be done.
Right.
However, there are some significant challenges that need to be overcome. I've only done one in my career.
Okay.
And so, I've been doing this for 17 years now, and they're challenging, I guess is what I would say, but that
I believe
doesn't
it.
mean they can't be done.
Right.
But there's some nuances there that you've got to overcome.
Got it. Okay. Got it. So then, if let me ask you this then, what would you? With that being said, if it were you, if Jimmy Versalina was the VA loan chairman head, I'm not sure what that position is, but you're in that seat, you're in that slot, right? What would you do to improve that system? How would you go about working that so it's actually useful for, and not even just useful, but easier for a veteran?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question. I don't think I've ever been asked that before. So, simply stated, I would have it mirror construction to perm lending as it exists right now,
Right.
where a VA borrower can make the payments, interest only payments, and then after the construction has been completed, it then converts into a 30-year fixed
Got it.
VA
Okay.
home loan.
Got it. Yeah, that
Yeah.
seems like it seems like the smarter way to make that move. I like it. All right, Jimmy. Let's before we close out, at least the first part of the interview. I still got one more question. I want us to go through. Um,
All right.
you've talked about the VA loan itself. We've talked about a little bit about the VA construction loan. Here's one that I think is a burning question that anybody who's moving is going to have. In your opinion, in your professional experience, is the prices when it comes to a brand new build, like new construction, versus buying a home that's pre-owned, does that at all matter, or do you feel like that actually affects the process, not the process, but getting approved for the VA loan itself?
I'm not a fan of new construction
Got it.
uh, as a whole.
Okay.
The reason why is I think that we are taking additional risk that's associated with new construction homes from an inventory perspective. And you're speaking to somebody that is probably jaded a little bit in this area because of my own personal experience, but I bought a
Right.
home in 2006 in a new home division on the outskirts of town. And you can imagine what happened as a result when we entered into the subprime mortgage meltdown. That area
Mm,
was unfinished, which created an inventory kind of supply glut and was some
mhm.
of the hardest hit areas. In fact, I just received an email from a veteran uh, that I replied to today, where she told me that she bought her home for 500,000 in a new
Mhm.
home build community, and the builder brought their prices down and they're selling it for roughly $60,000 less than what her original price was at.
Golly.
So I look at it like if I had the choice, and I'm not saying that this is always going to happen to anybody that buys in a new home community. I'm sure there's been a lot of people that have done really well in them. But if I'm given the option
Mm-hmm.
from just like if I were giving you an option for an investment, I said, here's one that's safe, that's got a large potential upside. Here's another one that's also got a large potential upside, but with more risk. Which one would you choose? Well,
Right.
I think if you're buying in an established community that's already built out and inventory is low, well, history tells us that you look at supply and demand, supply is low, demand remains high, values are going to go up. But if you're purchasing in an area that's perhaps undeveloped or unfinished, and you've got potential supply increasing as a result, that could adversely impact home values. So that's my educated answer on why I think that it may be in the best interest for a veteran or active duty service member to buy in an existing established community.
Right.
By no means is that a blanket statement, but I have seen, even today, as I had mentioned, that there is additional risk that's associated with that.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. That's a new lesson because I'm actually in the process of doing the PCS myself, and we have looked at new bills, we've looked at old, we've looked at the whole nine, and it's just
Sure.
really interesting that thought process that moving into a place like that you can adversely affect your long term number as opposed to the short term number because it's not you're just looking to be comfortable. You want to be in a place that's got a nice school system, is comfortable. You got 2 or 3 floors, maybe an office, a library, hopefully all that can
Right.
be impacted by the shenanigans that we call the market, and there's just nothing you can do to control it. It just is what it is. That's interesting, though.
Correct.
I've learned a new lesson today. I appreciate that, Jimmy. It's good stuff. All right, Jimmy,
My pleasure, sir.
we're gonna hit our last two sections. First one is what we call troop to task, and for those who are listening, watching, don't know what troop to task is, what's going to happen is Jimmy's going to give you one thing you can do today to get started in your VA loan process. We talked about it a little bit earlier. I'm sure he's going to rehash some of that, but it's one action you can do right now to get your process started. Jimmy, give him the troop to task.
Educate yourself by visiting my YouTube channel, Jimmy Versalino, Jimmy, V as in Victor, Ercellino. There you're going to be able to intake a significant amount of information as relates to VA home loans. And from there, you can make an informed decision on how you'd like to proceed.
Jimmy, how else can they get, because you've mentioned it a couple times, but just for clarity, one last time, how else can people get a hold of you if they need to get a loan done or they just want to learn more about the VA itself?
Yes, sir. So again, YouTube channel, Jimmy Versalino, Vercellino. They can also visit my website, VA Loans, VALOANS, for
Love it.
FOR vets, VETS.com, VA Loans for vets.com. You can also email me, Jimmy at VA Loans for vets.com.
I love it. Jimmy, thank you again for coming on. Ladies and gentlemen, for those of you watching, remember you're better than you were, but you're not half as good as you're going to be. I want you to take the rest of the week and I want you to punch it in the face. Go out there, be great, and get some success. Until next time.
Much love, my man. Thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy.